welcome to the video. It's Sunday, May 2nd. We're going to be breaking down this 10-game day slate that we have over on DraftKings today. Also, if anyone's interested in playing any NASCAR DFS, it's a really fun DFS sport to play. Personally, my favorite. We do have a race today at 3 p.m. if you want to check out my preview video, or I'll be going live today at 1 p.m. Eastern, just kind of hang out and talk about the slate. So check that out if you want to. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. We're like 20 more subs to 8K, so that'd be really cool if you could hit that today or tomorrow, whatever. Do appreciate all the support on here. You can follow me over on social media, handles in the bottom corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that, for the projections, optimizers, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link is down below. We got a few hundred people in there, but I think that's kind of it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we will start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And we'll start up top with our ace of the slate, Max Scherzer, at a surprising price point of $9,700. I know he struggled in his last start, but he was also playing the Blue Jays in that like middle school stadium, so I'm going to give him a free pass there. But $9,700 for a matchup at home versus the Marlins. Not really sure why he's that cheap, because besides that last start, he's been kind of lights out so far this season, multiple games over 30 points. So you can sign me up for all the Max Scherzer I can handle today. Only a 3.1 implied team total against him. Slight favorite because there's another good pitch on the mound in the opposite side of this game in Trevor Rogers. So it's not going to be an absolute cakewalk for the Nationals to pick up a win for Max here. But as long as he can pitch well, maybe gives up only a run, has a ton of strikeouts, which he can certainly have. He's got an 8K prep over in Vegas. I think it should be a pretty good day owning Max Scherzer at below $10,000. That's not something you usually see quite too often. About 100 pitches per game, 94 is fastball, 3.55 exit, 3.4 Sierra, 31% K rate, doesn't really walk too many guys, 12 Ks per 9. The one issue with him is that he does give up a little bit of struggle in the home run department, give up a little bit of power, but besides that, maybe a solo shot or two. The strikeout should be there and doesn't typically get blown up, so you can sign me up for all the Max Scherzer I can get today. And if you're looking at the Miami Marlins splits versus righties this year, pretty pedestrian numbers, 26.6% K rate, only a 107 team ISO, 282 WOBA, and an 83 WRC plus. So definitely like Max Scherzer a lot. I assume he's going to be super high owned today, but I don't see how you pass that price point up in cash games. If you want a direct pivot off of Scherzer, or you could use him as an SP2 as well. But Christian Javier here, $9,400. He's had some really good games this season. I believe that's 3 really good games in a row. There's no implied team total out yet here, but I'd have to imagine it's going to be probably in the mid-3s for the Rays. That would be my assumption. It's a very pitcher-friendly park in Tampa Bay. He's got a 6K prop over in Vegas, and the numbers have been good for him this year so far. And now the one thing I will say, his ERA and xFIP numbers would indicate he's getting a bit lucky since last season, a 2.76 ERA paired with a 4.4 and 4.04 Sierra, but those are still respectable numbers. Sierra more so than the xFIP, but 27.3% K rate I can get behind. Doesn't really give up too much in the batting average department. Low whip, low WOBA given up, low ISO, just pretty much low numbers overall. And the strikeout upside versus Tampa Bay, I do think is worth it. Looking at their splits this season versus righties, a 25% clip, which isn't as much as some of the other teams here, but it's still a pretty good number. And dating back to last year, they were a team that struck out quite a bit versus both lefties and righties. So far this season, they're striking out more so versus lefties than they are righties, but I still think we can use Christian Javier in a pitcher-friendly park and a strikeout happy lineup, I should say. Then Lucas Giolito, $8,600. So he was looking fantastic in his last start. Then at the very end, I think he got up to nearly like 120 pitches. I'm not sure why they left him out there, but they left him out way too long. I was even listening to a podcast and they were thinking the same thing. Like his body language was saying, "Hey, I'm done out here," but they just left him out there. Kept giving up runs. I forget what team that was against. I want to say it was Detroit, but he was looking really good. Then the 4 runs he gave up kind of killed his day. I want to say like around 14, 16 fantasy points. But besides that, before letting him go out there to die in the last inning that he was out there, he was looking pretty darn good. And I know he had that terrible start versus Boston at that 11 a.m. game, but I'm kind of willing to write that off. But since last season, his numbers pretty darn good, around 100 inning sample size, throwing usually around 100 pitches per game, 3.31 xFIP, 32.7% K rate. The guy's got ace level stuff, and at $8,600 against a soft matchup in Cleveland. There's a couple good bats there, like Franmil Reyes. Jose Ramirez is a very good bat. Then you got Eddie Rosario, some other guys that are like, okay for the most part, like Cesar Hernandez. But outside of those 3 guys, like Rosario, Luplo versus lefties, but versus righties, he's kind of neutralized. And Ramirez, you can definitely navigate your way through this lineup. So maybe you pitch on Jose Ramirez, but Giolito's in a fine spot here, $8,600. Indians around 25-26% K rate this season with kind of pedestrian WOBA average and power numbers. So I think you can certainly use Giolito at $8,600. You could use him as an SP2. Only 3.5 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, and a 6.5 K prop over in Vegas. And if you want a cheaper SP2, we have Tyler Mahle here, $7,800. He showed some really good strikeout numbers so far this season, and dating back to last year, he's got a 31.7% K rate. Now, walks can be a bit of an issue, a 10.6% walk rate, but doesn't typically give up too much power. He will struggle more so with the lefties rather than the righties. Very tough on righties. Lefties, a bit of a different problem, but even then, he's still been a pretty good pitcher so far this year. I guess Anthony Rizzo would be one of the guys that does scare me a little bit, maybe a Jason Hayward as well. But if you can get around those guys, I think he can rack up some strikeouts versus guys like Chris Bryant, Javier Baez. Javier Baez will swing at just about anything he sees. I don't think he's ever seen a pitch he doesn't like. But 3.91 implied team total against him, 56% chance for a win, so he's a slight favorite, 6.5 K prop over in Vegas. It's not a pitcher-friendly park, so that's one concern, but his numbers have been fine since last year, and the Cubs are striking out around a 26.5% clip versus righties this year, so I think that price point on Mahle, even though there's some downside here, especially in the park he's pitching in, and there's some good bats in the Cubs lineups, it's just, I think the strikeouts can be there, and at $7,800, I do think he's definitely worth some shares, especially in tournaments. That's kind of it for the pitching, so let's move on right to the bats. And as per usual, we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, and hit the outfield as well. So up top, we have Gary Sanchez, $5,100, and I'm only going to get here in full-on stacks, and if I have money to spend at the catcher position, but if I'm spending up for Yankees, it's definitely not going to be Gary Sanchez. It's going to be Aaron Judge, DJ LeMahieu, Giancarlo Stanton. It's not going to be Gary Sanchez, but if you happen to have money to spend up for catcher today, Jose Urena, the pitcher, we can certainly pick on. They have a team total above 5 right now. I can see that rising as the day goes on. There's a lot of totals that aren't out yet. The Yankees are going to have one of the highest totals today. The Detroit bullpen's not very good, so if they can get to Urena early on, who's not very good himself, should be another good day for the Yankees, who have seemed to kind of hit their stride because they've been terrible to start the season. But so past week now, they've been hitting the ball pretty well. I've been stacking them, I feel like, almost every single day. Christian Vazquez, $4,100, just kind of a nice mid-range play here versus Folty. I do think the Red Sox are a decent stack today. Folty's not a terrible pitcher, but he can. I think the last game he got pretty lucky. I think he gave up like 8 hits. I think he only gave up like 1 earned run though. But Folty's not a pitcher he's pretty average for the most part. He can be below average at times, and the Red Sox have been hitting the ball very well so far this season, and I think they're a decent stack today. Guys like JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, Verdugo, Vazquez all grade out pretty well for me today. And Alex Jackson, $2,300, assuming he's in the lineup today. Just a cheap bat on the Atlanta Braves, which I think are going to be one of the top stacks today. There's no team total out yet for the team, but I'm going to assume we're in the hitter-friendly park, and well, it's not Toronto, in Florida. I think it's like Dunedin, Florida. I think that's how you pronounce it, Dunedin. Either way, very, very hitter-friendly park, and I believe yesterday they had a 5.5 implied team total versus Tommy Malone in the opener. So I would assume versus Ross Stripling, who's, hasn't really made too many starts this year, but I'd say it's probably going to be around 5.5, and yeah, I think the Rays are an excellent stack today. You can sign me up for them once again, and if you just want a cheap part of the Braves, Alex Jackson is your guy. Dropping out of first base, we have Freddie Freeman, $5,400. If you can afford him, I would say he's the top bat in the Braves today, just because you get the lefty on righty matchup here versus Ross Stripling. Obviously, Ronald Acuna is always in a super elite play, but anytime Freeman's facing a righty, he got such good numbers versus them, it's going to be really hard to pass him up. And besides Freeman, first base isn't a very good position today, so I could see if you just want to make that one of your spend-up spots, I think it definitely makes some sense. I do like Freddie quite a bit. Alex Kirilloff, $3,000. I know you had that double dunk performance a couple nights ago, but you get the cheap lefty on righty matchup here versus Brad Keller, who's a pretty average pitcher for the most part. He can get a lot of ground balls, but he's only $3,000, hits in the middle of the order, and I could see the Twins being a decent stack today. 4.6 implied team total. It's nothing too crazy, but it's not terrible either, and I think, $3,000 also eligible in the outfield. I think he's a fine salary league play for the most part. Then Pablo Sandoval, $2,400, just if you want some cheap Braves exposure. Like if you can't afford Freddie Freeman, you can't afford Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies, I realize they're very expensive. Pablo Sandoval is dirt cheap, hits in the middle of the order. He's a switch hitter, so he's always going to have the platoon advantage, and I think he'd be a fine spot. And he's actually, it's only a 24 play appearance sample size this year, but he's actually hitting the ball very well with a 484 WOBA, 300 batting average, and a 450 ISO with a 207 WRC+. Are those numbers going to come down? Yes, but he's hitting the ball well, and he's only $2,400, also eligible at third base as well. Up down at second base, we have DJ LeMahieu, $5,200, kind of off to a slow start this year, but I feel like in recent games, he just keeps racking up hits, base hits, it seems like. The power's going to show up eventually, only a .083 ISO. We've seen in the past his numbers were higher, but he's just a high contact guy, doesn't really strike out too much. And Jose Urena, not a pitcher I would fear by any means, so you can definitely stack up the Yankees once again. And DJ, while I'd rather spend up for the power bats and Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, He's still a very solid play in my opinion. I'd rather play Odor though personally at second base just to save the money, but I still think DJ's a fine play if you want to put him over on first base as well. Ozzy Albies, $4,700. Prefer him versus lefties, but you can certainly play him versus righties too. And just hitting cleanup for arguably the best stack in the slate. I'd have to see what their team total is going to be, but I would guess it's going to be around 5.5 today, and definitely like the Braves once again. Then Rougned Odor, $3,900. Typically versus a righty, he hits near right in the middle of the order. If it's a lefty on the mound, he hits in the bottom. But Odor's been okay this year. I mean, he's shown some decent power. 231 ISO. Strikeout rate's pretty low as well, surprisingly, because usually we imagine that would be a little bit higher. But it's sitting at around 15% right now. Number will probably rise as the season goes on, but hitting for a low average. But it's all just about cheap power, and he's on a really good lineup on the Yankees. So definitely like Rougned Odor quite a bit. Going down to third base, we have Rafael Devers, $5,200. Elite numbers versus right-handed pitching. I do think the Boston Red Sox are a decent stack here versus Fulte. He's got some pretty average numbers for the most part, and Devers has got some, I'd say, borderline elite numbers versus right-handed pitching, so definitely get behind some Devers today, especially if you're stacking the Red Sox. I think in the middle of that order, he should have plenty of RBI opportunities. Gio Urshela, $4,200, is a cheaper part of that Yankee stack. Like, if you can't afford the super expensive bats, you could just throw in guys like Rougned Odor, Gleyber Torres, Gio Urshela, and you can make a decent stack that way as well if you can't afford the big bats. Mike Moustakas, $4,100. Lefty on righty matchup here versus Trevor Williams, who I would say is a pretty average pitcher for the most part. Sometimes he can be a little bit above average, but for the most part, Trevor Williams isn't a pitcher like, oh gosh, like you're not like a little scared of rostering bats against him. I mean, only a 4.59 implied team total, so it's not like it's like a cakewalk matchup here. And if we're looking at Trevor Williams' splits since last season, he has improved a bit, but going over to his splits. So he's got about 91 on his fastball, 5.65 ERA. XFIP's a little bit better at 4.57, so that's about a run lower, actually a little bit more than a run lower. 21% K rate, 8% walk rate, but I still think we can use some of these lefty bats versus Trevor Williams today in Great American Small Park, which does favor the bats, and Mike Moustakas is pretty cheap and he's batting cleanup, so we always know he's had some decent power in his bat versus right-handed pitching. Then going on a shortstop, we have Xander Bogaerts, $5,200, just another part of that Red Sox stack, and it's kind of hard to stack the Red Sox. I say this every time, but they're pretty pricey. The catch is a little pricey. Shortstop, third base, outfield. Not the easiest team to stack in the world, but if you do have the money for him, Xander Bogaerts has been great this year. He's batting .330 with a .216 ISO, so I like Bogaerts and Red Sox stacks. Gleyber Torres, for reasons I've already mentioned. Now his price is kind of rising. I want to say he was he in the 3K range a week ago? I can't remember exactly, but he was definitely in the low 4s. Now he's kind of creeping towards 5K. I still think he's a decent play. I mean, the power hasn't been there at all for Gleyber Torres, only a .053 ISO this season, but just a cheaper part of the Yankee stack. Not super cheap these days. The price is rising, but if you can't afford the Judges and Stantons, he's at a little bit of a discount. And shortstop, probably not the best position today. There's a few good plays, but I'd say other positions have better spots today. So don't hate Torres and Yankee stacks. Or you could use him as a one-off as well. Then Corey Seager, $4,600, pretty cheap price point, going up against a pitcher who's making his MLB debut. So if you want to use these Dodgers today, I know I don't have a lot of them listed. I'd be kind of curious to see what their implied team total is today, but it's a hitter-friendly park in Milwaukee. You can stack up the Dodgers. I wouldn't have any issue with that. Guys like Max Muncy, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, all those guys I think are viable today. Will Smith as well at the catcher position, but Corey Seager, since last season, he's been crushing right-handed pitching. His numbers this year aren't amazing, only a .255 average, 196 ISO, 123 WRC+. Not awful, but they were much better last year. But again, we're working with small sample sizes. Only 116 plate appearances for Corey Seager. We got about 400, 500 more of those to go. So $4,600 seems like a really good price point for Corey Seager going up against a brand new pitcher in the MLB. Then going down to the outfield, we have JD Martinez, $5,700. He's actually been crushing righties this year. Obviously, we always love JD versus lefties, but those numbers versus righties this season are looking absolutely fantastic. But if you want to just look at the overall numbers, 492 WOBA, 351 batting average, 394 ISO, and a 225 WRC plus with some other great numbers. So if you are stacking the Red Sox, it's really, really hard to leave off JD Martinez. Aaron Judge, $5,600. I'll kind of group them in together with Giancarlo Stanton, but they're kind of the same play. If I had to pick one, I'm probably going to pick Judge over Stanton just because there's a righty on the mound. And if there's a lefty on the mound, I'd probably say Stanton, but even then, they're pretty much the same exact play. But you can give me Aaron Judge. The past 2 games have been pretty good for him. I think he scored like 30-some points the day before that, where he had the double dong and he had a grand slam. And yesterday, didn't get any homers, but kind of just did well on the bases. So I like both of these guys quite a bit. Both guys have some of the most power in the entire league. And Jose Urinas and a pitcher that you should be scared of. I'm definitely giving the advantage to Aaron Judge and Stanton over Jose Urena and anyone that they throw at them in the bullpen. Ronald Acuna, $5,500, pretty expensive, but he went deep last night. I like all the Braves quite a bit today, and he's been on fire this season as well, batting .341 with a .479 WOBA and a .364 WRC plus, 364 ISO and a .203 WRC plus, which has very similar numbers to JD Martinez. Then Jesse Winker, $5,100. He's been amazing this season versus right-handed pitching, like absolutely amazing. But overall, he's batting .370. .464 WOBA, .193 WRC plus, and a near .700 slugging. And actually very similar numbers to JD Martinez and Ronald Acuna. So I definitely like Jesse Winker, assuming he is back in the lineup today. Yesterday it was Tyler Naquin leading off because Winker was in the lineup. But if he's back, I do like him. But if he's not in, I would assume Tyler Naquin would slide back into the leadoff spot, which would make me definitely have interest in Tyler Naquin today. Alex Verdugo, $4,600, just kind of like a cheaper part of that Red Sox stack. You could also throw Kike Hernandez in here as well, leading off. I want to say he's like $4,200, but all these guys are viable, and Alex Verdugo is fine versus righties, and he's batting .300 overall this year. Aaron Hicks is just a cheaper part of the Yankees stack if you can't afford the big boppers. I know it's not fun to trust his bat, but I mean, it's just such a good lineup. I mean, all these guys are viable for the most part. I feel like we have the entire lineup listed here, maybe besides like Clint Frazier. And then Willie Calhoun, $2,800, leading off versus a righty. He's been doing fine this year. Doesn't have a ton of power in his bat. I think we all know that. Less than a 100 ISO this year, but near 300 batting average and over a 350 on base percentage. So only $2,800 and a good, good spot in the order leading off. I think he's a fine play versus Garrett Richards, who's not like a scary pitcher, pretty average for the most part. He's definitely beatable. So definitely could play Willie Calhoun for value today. But with that being said, guys, I think it's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. If you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that if you want to join the community. And if you want to follow me over on social media, you know where to find me in the bottom hand corner of your screen. But I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hope the weather is wonderful wherever you are. I'll see you guys in the next video.